From the studios of Warrantech North, Jeffco Public Schools presents Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee.
This is Jeffco Public Schools Superintendent Dan McMinimee with another edition of Building Bright Futures, our podcast series designed to keep you up to date on all the great happenings within one of the largest school districts in Colorado and the country. Joining me today is Tim Reed, Executive Director of Facilities, and Steve Bell, Chief Operating Officer. Welcome to the program, Steve and Tim.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Stan.
So this morning, we're here to talk a little bit about the new school at Candelas. So as I think all of us know, the Jeffco Board of Education voted in September to build a new school to accommodate the growing northwestern area of Jefferson County. How much have the facilities needs in Jeffco Public Schools changed over the last 24 to 36 months, Tim?
I think we've seen significant growth in new residential development, particularly in the Candelas and Layden Rock areas. But we're also seeing a great deal of growth in the Whispering Creek area, as well as what we call infill projects, which are located south of 72 and in areas of ranchettes that are now being converted to residential development in the Arvada area.
So, Steve, I know you have the unique perspective of actually growing up in the Arvada area, so you've seen a lot of change over the years. What's your perception of how the facility needs have changed?
Well, in the north area, Dan, we've seen a significant acceleration of building, I think partially due to the economic recovery in Colorado and in the nation at large, but specifically in the northwest area, which is primarily the Arvada area of our district. These projects that have been on the planning phase for quite some time have accelerated, so our long-term view of the growth being a 15 to 17-year build-out plan has now been compressed to a 5 to 7-year build-out program. And, you know, the interesting thing is, depending upon the pro formas that we see from developers and builders, we could be experiencing growth of 7,000 to 8,000 new students in the north area alone over the next 5 to 7 years. Very significant change from what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years.
So, Tim, the next thing I want to ask about is we're getting multiple questions on a variety of topics, things like size of schools, where will the boundaries be, what's the benefits, how large is the property? Can you kind of walk through us the whole picture about what this school is going to look like in Candelas?
Sure. When the board voted, they voted $18 million to build this. We estimate that at this point, with construction costs being what they are, that'll build about 60 to 65,000 square feet, which should house roughly 600 students. The Candelas site that we have is approximately 25 acres, of which 22 to 23 will actually be buildable. We're currently in the process right now of master planning the site to determine where the new building will go. It should only occupy between 8 to 10 acres of that land, so there's plenty of opportunity for future development at that site. The board voted for a Kasich School, which tends to be more of a neighborhood type concept, even though we're building larger schools these days than we did in the past. Ultimately, this school we're looking at somewhere around 800, possibly 1,000 when it's all built out. These become administratively and as well as from a utilities and a maintenance standpoint, very efficient buildings to operate and maintain.
So I know this has been a really challenging conversation for about a year amongst us and amongst the board members, and I know that this is really a piece of a bigger comprehensive plan, and that's one of the challenges we've faced is we really need more seats than one school can provide at this point. So in addition to this school, there's some other sites at Layden Rock, there's a site down at Table Rock, there is the Sierra Phase 2. Can you talk about how this fits into that bigger plan that we've talked about?
Well, the first phase of the overall plan was to get a new school built in the north area, and we had identified 3 locations, and the chosen site was Candelas. Equally important is the completion of the Sierra Phase 2, which will bring that up to about a 760 student facility, and also address numerous educational issues that we have at that with that building. The other 2 sites that are available are at Layden Rock, which is at 58th and Highway 93, Table Rock Mesa, which is at 58th and Highway 93, and then Table Rock Mesa, which is located about a mile and a half south of the Candela site. Both of these sites work well for a neighborhood facility. They should be able to accommodate the Table Rock site, a K-8 facility if that's decided to go in that direction, or a K-6. Layden Rock is topographically challenged, so we view that as probably a smaller neighborhood-type school at K-6.
And so, Steve, in several venues, I've heard you talk about the problem being not just north of 80th, but it's really north of I-70, and the growth is really happening in a lot of pockets in our neighborhoods, too. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We do categorize little pocket, as you refer to them as pocket growths, as being infill projects, and we have significant infill going on in our district north of Highway or Interstate 70. So, as I refer often, this is not a north of 80th Avenue issue. This is a north of I-70 issue. And our infill projects right now indicate to us that we could be seeing 1,200 to 1,500 new units, residential units being built in various little pockets. Some are 20 homes, some are 80, and the numbers vary. But aggregate, we have a growth problem that extends in our north area in its entirety, not just simply the northwest area alone.
We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll return with Steve Bell and Tim Reed.
For Daniel Garcia, the Golden Gloves Gym is the next best thing to home.
You need to have the footwork. If you don't have the speed, then you'll just get overwhelmed and stuff. And yeah, you just need to be slick.
You'll find this Arvada West freshman here most nights after school, working on his dream of becoming a world boxing champ.
I want to become great. Not really a star, I just want to change people and want them to be inspired, like how I was with other boxers.
Watch the full story now on JPS-TV, a place where you can discover your district.
Jefferson Public Schools, building bright futures.
So I wanted to shift gears here and talk a little bit about financing schools. And, you know, every board of education has a decision-making process that they go through to decide how to finance these big-ticket items. Don't want to necessarily get into that, but I would like to talk about the three general models that a school district can use to finance schools so that our listeners understand, what are the tools that our board has to use, or any board has to use, in terms of financing these big-ticket items.
Well, as a school district in the state of Colorado, we essentially have three options in which to finance long-term capital improvements. The first is through the issuance of general obligation bonds. That's a borrowing by the school district like many public entities employ. We've done it here in Jefferson County dating back to 1992 for our long-term facility needs. General obligation bonds are voter approved, so there's an election that's required. Voters authorize the amount of debt to be incurred through the issuance of the bonds and a repayment schedule over time. So that's option number one. The second is through a borrowing technique known as lease revenue financing, and it's sort of like leasing a car, if you would refer to it like that we're going to employ a lease obligation where we pledge collateral that usually is the building that we're constructing for investors to buy a lease obligation or loan us money on an annual basis. Lease obligations, we've used them in this district. Most school districts in Colorado have, but that employs an opportunity for us to be more reactive and not necessarily have to require voter approval, but it does require that the repayment of that obligation comes from our general fund as it currently exists. So there's no new revenue attached. That's the second. The third is simply by having cash on hand. That's pretty rare in Colorado for school districts to have significant dollars of cash. In our issue for this particular site in Candelas, we are employing what is referred to as district underspend dollars from general fund from fiscal year 2015. Those are dollars that were not spent that were budgeted, and that's about a $15 million amount there. And then the board directed us to add to that $3 million from capital transfer. Capital transfer is the money that generally is used for ongoing deferred maintenance, repair, remodel, and such for our district facilities at large. But we're going to take $3 million of that for this particular year, add it to the 15, so we have an $18 million sum of money to finance the project here.
So we feel like that 18 million is going to get us about 600 seats, and we know that in the future we're going to have to start taking a look at possibly thinking about a bond. What would that mean for the school district? Because we're going to build, if we do go out for a bond, and if the board successfully asks for that to happen, we're going to have a bigger picture than just a couple schools in Northwest Arvada. There's a bigger capital need in our district. Can you take a couple minutes and talk about that?
Sure. Dating back to 1992, the district employed a process whereby they employed the development of a facilities master plan. That master plan was with the purpose of outlining facility needs for new growth and existing facility management, or physical assets, if you will, over a long term. The decision was that we would go to the voters on intervals of 4 to 6 years and seek voter approval for general obligation bonds. We did that in 1992 when this plan development started. We did it in 1997, in 2004, 2008, and 2012. Have been successful in Jeffco schools except for the 2008 proposal to the voters, and that was defeated by a narrow margin. So we're at the place in our district where we have significant facility needs for our existing physical plant and for new growth that is coming into the district. So we are, as you know, Dan, we're talking about, we need to develop a proposal for the voters to consider for the issuance of general obligation bonds in the not too distant future.
So shifting back to the building construction in Candelas, Tim, can you talk a little bit about the timeline for the school, the groundbreaking, classes are scheduled to begin, and then talk a little bit about the process for design of the building and input from the community?
Sure. Basically, we were given the authorization to proceed back in September. So what we did was we issued a request for qualifications to architects. We received about 20 responses. We interviewed 4 of those architects, and we selected Hord, Copeland, and Mocht, which is a nationwide firm, having an office here, which was formerly Slater Paul, which has done a number of our buildings. They have been working on the, like I said earlier, the master plan and beginning some preliminary programming and things of that nature. We also have a request for qualifications out right now for construction management, general contractor services. That closes actually this Friday, and we will be screening those and then make a selection and interview that person also. We feel it's very important because of the constraints and the timeline that we're working on that we bring a contractor on board to work with the design team as early as possible so that we can get the maximum benefit from the funds that we have. We're tentatively looking at a groundbreaking right now of April 2016. And we're pretty comfortable that is that's doable. We may issue packages. We could issue a site development and a foundation package initially, and then a second package, which would be actually the building portion. But that's to be determined. We're shooting for building completion actually in June of 2017. That leaves us approximately 2 months to do a shakedown, get furniture in, and things of that nature so that it's operational in August of 2017. That's our target date. We're confident and comfortable with that date. Believe that we won't have any trouble meeting that.
So we have ed specs for all of our buildings. So we have some things that we want to make sure every elementary school has X. So one of the questions we've been getting is, well, will it have a playground? Will it have a gymnasium? I mean, there's some things that every school has because of the curriculum we want to deliver.
That's correct. We have an educational spec for all of our facilities from pre-K all the way through high school. We also have technical guidelines which outline what materials and systems that we want our buildings to be constructed within. In this case, we have formulated a committee that consists of facilities people, some people from the educational side, and we're working right now with the architect. Next month, we will bring into this committee a principal in that area, the achievement director for that area, and some citizen representation as we actually begin to go into the design process. We We have a design advisory committee or group that is involved with all of our projects, so that we really have always wanted community representation in any of the buildings that we have, so that we end up with a building that the community really feels like they participated in the development and the design of, and that will be the case here as well.
So in my career in 2 different school districts, I've had an opportunity to be a part of the design team phase, which is what you're talking about. And then I had the cool and unique opportunity to open a high school down in Douglas County. And I can tell you from a principal's perspective, that's a really exciting time, but it's also a challenging time, because you're learning a lot. Not only, usually our principals know a lot about curriculum, instruction, and what happens in the classroom, but they don't necessarily have a huge knowledge of the building itself. And that's what I think your team brings to the table. What are some of the things that you want to make sure our listeners know about in terms of considerations for buildings that your team tries to deliver?
Well, we want to make sure that that the building has sufficient flexibility that it doesn't hinder the educational delivery process. In other words, that the teachers and the administrative staff have the resources and the technology and the area and the space that they need to really work, and over the expected 50-year lifespan of this building, the flexibility to allow the building to respond to various changes in how education is delivered. Because we've seen that. In my career, I've seen going from open schools back to individualized classrooms, and now we're looking at the STEM options or STEAM options, which are different ways of delivering school. But we want to make sure that the facility is flexible enough to handle this.
Well, I think that's one of the exciting things about this process is this is really the intersection of everything we do for kids, a facility, transportation, curriculum, instruction, leadership. All of those pieces have to be accounted for as we move forward, and it really truly is a team effort to deliver a quality building that our public expects us to have. So I just wanted to let you both know, really appreciate your efforts over the last year. I know it's been a challenge at times, but we have the prize in front of us, and we're very excited in exciting times in Jefferson County. So that's it for this edition of Building Bright Futures. Thank you to this week's guests, Steve Bell and Tim Reed, and to our Warren Tech audio student, Dominic Doherty, for engineering today's episode. Don't forget that you can catch our podcast in several different ways: on iTunes, on JPS-TV, on our official YouTube Jeffco channel, and on the Jeffco Public Schools website. Drop me a line and let me know what you think of the podcast, or if you'd like to see a specific topic covered. Let's build some bright futures together.
You've been listening to Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee. This is a production of Jeffco Public Schools.